So we previously discussed in part one of our preparing for C&P examinations, the relevance of medical opinions. Now we're going to discuss the relevance of medical examinations. Now when you have a C&P examination, the medical opinion and examination are done by the same provider usually on the same day. You don't realize two separate things are being requested. So assuming the medical opinion portion goes well and the VA is going to concede that the military caused whatever condition you have, the next thing is establishing the degree of impairment. The show me the money. The examination equals percentages. Percentages equal money. So when you get into the examination portion, you really get into what's known as 38 CFR Part 4, commonly referred to as the rating schedule. Generically, when you dig into different musculoskeletal or body systems, the VA breaks up pretty much every part of the body into different categories. And in those categories, they say there's a different diagnostic code for most conditions under the sun. For example, you might have osteoarthritis listed, you might have diabetes mellitus listed, you might have retinopathy, just every medical condition. And if there's not a medical condition, then you rate it under an analogous rating, and that's in a different video that we've done. But regardless, when you get into Part 4 and you get into the rating schedule, every condition has a respective diagnostic code. The diagnostic code has respective symptoms and criteria that's set forth in order for you to establish a certain degree of impairment or evaluation in 10% increments. The symptoms equal an evaluation. So, for example, if you can bend your knee to a certain level, maybe that's worth 10%. But if you can only bend it a little bit less than that, maybe that's worth 20%. Symptoms equal evaluations. And again, those are broken up in 10% increments by the VA. One of the ways you can help establish the severity of your symptoms is through medical treatment. Go to the doctor. If you have a condition, go get it documented. Your word is not your bond with the VA. Despite it being a pretty favorable adjudicative process and legal system, you gotta give the adjudicator and judge something. Go be treated for these conditions. If you need medicine, get it documented. Don't buy everything over the counter. Don't treat yourself. Play the game to a certain extent. Even if you know you can treat yourself, if you need treatment, get it documented. Maybe it's just an urgent care. Maybe it's just going to a homeopathic professional on the outside that you can request those records from, but you want records. You want to be able to give the adjudicator or judge something in hand that they can say, this isn't just the veteran's words, this is somebody else. So number one, be treated, all right? Because that C&P examiner, the whole purpose of part 2 of the C&P examination process we're talking about today is how can you put yourself in the best position to understand and prepare documentation to have a favorable result. So when you're going in for the medical examination process of the C&P exam, they're going to do a host of different tests on you. Before they do that, if they do their job properly, the examiner I'm talking about, they should have reviewed these records. And that's where I'm getting into. How do you benefit yourself here? Well, you'd be treated. If it's 6 months before you're going for the exam, whatever it is, just get some records. And you can bring them that day, hand them off to the examiner, say, here you go. These are my treatments. And send them to the VA before as well, because the VA is supposed to send those records to the examiner before they examine you. They're supposed to review the records. In addition to the medical treatment records, do symptom logs. Go to our website, www.vadisabilitygroup.com, and go to the resource tab, and you'll find a host of different symptom logs. These symptom logs are nothing more than a contemporaneous diary of the symptoms you experience from your medical conditions. They're invaluable. A lot of judges and adjudicators like them because they show, again, real-time documentation of the severity of your symptoms. And they're quite probative. They're credible when you're doing it in real time. So don't just try to fill it in at the end of the month, once a month. Do it daily. Keep them by your bedside. And before you go to bed, just take literally 10 seconds to write a few things down about your conditions. Those symptom logs should also be submitted to the VA. When you go into your C&P examination, these things should be of record. And now you're at a good starting point to be examined by the doctor because they say, okay, he's been treated and he's kept logs. This must be real. But if you go into this doctor for an examination and you haven't been treated for anything, you haven't documented anything, I mean, think about it. As a medical professional, to a certain extent, they're not comfortable writing that you have a diagnosis of A, B, and C if you've never been treated for it. What are they supposed to stand on other than your word? They want a little something. So it's hard to go into a doctor talking about how severe your symptoms are if you haven't documented it. Moving on from there, once we've documented properly and you're in that C&P examination, we're talking about part 2 here, the examination. Now they're going to look at the degree of your impairment. So the examination itself, the examiner is going to have a form, and they're commonly referred to on the outside world as disability benefits questionnaires, or DBQs. The VA gives its own doctors a functional equivalent. Now that DBQ form that the doctor is going to complete, there's probably 50 of them or 60 of them, broken down by body systems. So they have one for the back. Let's talk about the back. Now in the back, page 1 of that form is going to be, what's the diagnosis? Now maybe it's a degenerative disc disease, maybe it's an arthritis, maybe it's a strain, but they check a box and then they put the respective code for that condition. Moving on to page 2 and 3 is usually getting into the subjective information. That's where the veteran reports to the doctor on that day of the exam, oh, I have all these problems. I got A, B, and C. I can't bend over. We're talking about the back here. I can't bend over. I get these nerve impairments shooting down the back of my leg. I get numbness and tingling. Sometimes I don't feel my feet. I struggle to get in and out of cars. Sleeping at night's really difficult. So that's the subjective portion of this examination process. The doctor asks, and the doctor becomes a scrivener, essentially, where they just keep writing down everything, or they're supposed to at least annotate everything that you tell them. In the subjective portion, that's just you stating what you believe you're experiencing. Part 3 of that examination is going to be the doctor physically examining you. Maybe they see how far you can bend over, and maybe they take measurements of the range of motion of your back. Maybe they pinch your leg to see if you can feel it, to see if you have nerve impairment caused by an impinged nerve of your back. So we're talking modality tests, ranges of motion, things that in theory are objectively verifiable during an examination process. Another portion of the examination process is documenting how many times certain medications have been prescribed or taken. Maybe if you're, now let's move on from the back. Well, actually, we'll stay on the back. Maybe you've been prescribed different neurontin medicines or different medications for your nerve impairment caused by the back. Those can be quite relevant sometimes in establishing the degree of your impairment for the examination. So the third part, again, of this examination is going to be the doctor's assessment of you. That's the most important part. Usually in about 90% of these examinations, the doctor's assessment is the critical part. Not what you told them and they reported, but what they saw. So this examination is going to happen. If you claim 5 conditions, you're going to have 5 separate examinations during your C&P exam if it's the same type of examiner. For example, you might have an examiner for mental health. You might have a dentist who does an examination. You have a general medical provider and an audiologist. And then you have an ophthalmologist or optometrist for eye conditions. So those are really the primary types of doctors you'll go to. So those are the types of examiners you're going to go to. So if you claim an eye condition, a hearing condition, a joint or general medical condition, a mental health condition, and a dental condition, you in theory could have 5 separate C&P exams on 5 separate days. So be aware of that. If you claim all those conditions, you're going to go to 5 separate exams. And that's okay. Do the work up front. Claim these things if you have them. And then in those examinations, let's talk about the general medical exam, because those tend to be the longest and most comprehensive. If you go to a general medical examination and you claim your back, you claim diabetes, you claim a heart condition, and you claim acid reflux, then you're going to have 4 examinations. And the process I just explained, where they go through the diagnosis, and then they go through your subjective complaints, and then they do the examination itself, and the examination is a critical part, you're going to have that happen for every one of those claims. So you're going to have 5 examinations on the same day, or 3 examinations, or 4, depending on how many general medical conditions you claimed. So these examinations can last hours. Because they got to go through a lot of paperwork, and now a lot of times the doctors just check the boxes. They just go through and they make their mind up half the time before they even finish half the exam, sadly. But they do have a duty to provide a competent examination. So if you think you haven't had a competent examination where they haven't reviewed your records and they didn't touch you during an exam, well, report that. Say, I want another exam. Send a letter to the VA and sign it and say that the VA doctor who did the examination or the contracted provider didn't even touch you. They didn't bend your legs, your arms. There's no way they could have done a proper range of motion evaluation or instability evaluation, whatever that might be. If you have that sense, and make sure you report that to the VA, and hopefully that'll lead to a second examination being scheduled because the first one wasn't competent. Therefore, it's not probative for adjudicative purposes. But to bring this discussion full circle, we talked about VA examinations, part 2 of the C&P examination process. Part 1 is going to be the medical opinions. Part 2 is going to be the examination. Oftentimes, the C&P examiner provides both. But during the examination, we're talking about show me the money, getting to the degree of impairment. And they're going to do multiple examinations depending on what type of examiner is looking at you. If it's a general medical examination, they might do 3 to 5 to 10 examinations on the same day. And what I mean by that, again, is going to be 3 to 5 to 10 examination reports that they're completing for each body type that you're claiming. That is only secondary to you already having service connection or you getting service connection. If you filed for an increase, the only thing they're going to be bringing you in for is an examination because it presupposes you're already service connected. If you're filing for an increase, you're already service connected. They're only bringing you in for the examination. So again, if you have filed for an increase, you don't need to worry about service connection. You don't need to go into trying to convince the VA of something because you already did that. That ship has sailed. You have service connection. You only care about establishing the severity of your symptoms. Examinations are for establishing severity of your symptoms. An increased claim always presupposes service connection. I hope this makes sense. I hope this is valuable to you. Check out part 1, check out part 2, and the rest of our videos, and you can put the puzzle together a little bit. This stuff gets kind of complex.